Have you ever been proud of humiliating a total stranger you did not even know? I never thought I would. And yet, one Tuesday morning at Starbucks, that exact situation found me. Kindly comment which country you are watching this from. And it all began with a woman in a wedding dress, mascara running down her face, dragging a man behind her who looked like he had just been punched in the gut by life itself. I was standing in line, scrolling through my phone, trying to wake up, when she stormed through the door. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they locked onto me, like somehow I was the answer to her entire nightmare. You, she said, pointing with absolute certainty. Perfect. I need you to be my husband for the next 4 hours. The coffee shop froze. People stopped talking. Phones came out. Everyone turned to stare. It felt like time itself had paused while she explained her crisis, one desperate breath at a time. Her dress was smudged with dirt, her hair wild, mascara running down her cheeks like rivers. She was panicking in the most theatrical way imaginable. I'm sorry, what? I asked, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I honestly wanted coffee, not chaos. My wedding, she gasped, barely able to speak between sobs. It is happening right now, 3 blocks away. 200 guests, my family, his family, everyone. But the groom has been cheating on me with my maid of honor for months. The man she was dragging spoke quietly, almost embarrassed to be alive. That would be me. I stared at them, completely lost. And yet here I was, suddenly cast as the unexpected hero in the middle of a disaster. And you need me. To do what exactly? I asked, trying not to laugh because at this point, what else could I do? Because, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, I refused to walk back in there and tell everyone that my fairy tale wedding turned into a disaster. My grandmother flew in from Italy. My father spent his retirement fund. My boss gave me a promotion because she was excited about this wedding. The groom tried to intervene. Maybe we should just tell the truth, he said quietly, looking like he wished he could disappear. The truth, her voice cracked. The truth is you have been lying to me for months while I planned everything. The truth is I am supposed to be cutting cake right now, not standing in Starbucks watching my life fall apart. Her eyes turned to me, wild and pleading. Look, I know this sounds insane, but you are about my height in heels, dark hair. From a distance, nobody will know. Walk me down the aisle backwards. Say I do. Kiss me for photos. Dance for a few songs. Then I will figure out the rest. The barista was openly eavesdropping. Other customers were pulling out their phones. This was either going to be the most romantic thing ever or a complete disaster. This is crazy, I said, because what else could I say? I know, she admitted, but I am begging you. I will pay you $1,000, cash, right now. She started digging through her purse, hands trembling, pulling out bills more cash than I had seen in years. I wanted to hesitate. I wanted to walk away, but then I looked at her and realized she had absolutely no one else. Everyone else she could trust had failed her in some way, and somehow she had picked me. People will notice, the groom muttered, voice weak. People see what they want to see, she snapped. Everyone is crying, drinking, taking pictures. Half of them do not even know what he looks like without a beard anyway. I looked down. He was clean-shaven. I had a full beard. She was right. From a distance, and under a mask, nobody would ever notice. And, she continued, pulling a masquerade mask from her purse. It is a masked wedding. Everyone wears masks until the kiss. That was his idea. He cringed. That was before I ruined everything. So let me get this straight, I said, holding the mask like evidence in a crime. You want me to marry you while wearing a mask so nobody realizes I am not your exactly, she said. You would be saving me from total humiliation. Otherwise, I have to walk in there and admit I am the idiot who did not see this coming. The barista finally spoke. Are you ordering something, or, to venti dark roasts, to go? He is going to need the caffeine. I realized she had already made the decision for me. This was happening whether I liked it or not. I do not even know your last name, I said. Morrison. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison. Soon to be Sarah Elizabeth. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. Chen. David Chen. Soon to be Sarah Elizabeth Chen. Apparently. She handed me the coffee and the mask. The wedding is at Riverside Country Club, 3 blocks east. Ceremony starts in 20 minutes. The groom looked at us as if we had completely lost our minds. What about after? Reception. Families meeting each other. What about you cheating with my best friend? Sarah shot back. I will figure out the rest later. Right now, I just need to survive the next few hours. I nodded. Okay, fine, I will do it. But 3 conditions. First, after the ceremony, she would tell everyone the truth. I was not living someone else's lie forever. Second, if anyone asked me specific questions about their relationship, I would step in and answer. And third, the groom would not be allowed anywhere near the ceremony. I was about to humiliate him in the most satisfying way possible, and he would not be able to ruin it. 20 minutes later, I was running through the streets of the city, holding her hand, mask and tuxedo in place, adrenaline coursing through me. Every step toward the Riverside Country Club felt like stepping into a dream that had somehow gone terrifyingly real. Inside the hall, coordinators briefed me in rapid-fire instructions. Stand here, walk her down the aisle, repeat after the minister, kiss her for photos, smile, do not panic, do not panic. I repeated it like a mantra as I adjusted the mask, trying to look calm. All the while, I kept an eye on the groom. He looked pale, sweating, completely useless. I could not help the sense of satisfaction that was starting to build. This was about to get interesting. The music started. The ceremony was about to begin. 200 masked faces turned toward the back of the hall. And in that moment, I knew that soon, very soon, I would be standing in front of everyone, playing the husband to a woman I did not know, saving her wedding, and the man who had caused this chaos would get exactly what he deserved. And that is how it all started. By the time we arrived at Riverside Country Club, I had a full-body adrenaline shake going on. My hands were still trembling from the Starbucks encounter. And somehow, the idea that I was about to impersonate a man in front of 200 people made me feel like I had stepped into a parallel universe. I did not even know this woman beyond her first name. And now I was about to walk down an aisle holding her hand, while the man who had betrayed her sat somewhere in the building, presumably squirming with guilt. Sarah grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the side entrance. We do not have time for nerves, she said, mascara-streaked cheeks and all. Just follow me and do exactly what I tell you. Inside, the chaos was immediate. Coordinators, assistants, and caterers ran around with clipboards and trays of hors d'oeuvres, while florists adjusted bouquets with manic precision. It smelled like flowers, polished wood, and a hint of panic. Someone handed me a tuxedo bag, and I realized I was going to have to change right here in the corner, behind a folding screen that looked suspiciously flimsy. This is it, I muttered to myself as I unzipped the bag. The tuxedo smelled like dry cleaner chemicals and old ambition. I had no idea if it would fit, but I put it on anyway. It was tight in some places and loose in others. But the mask Sarah had given me would cover most of my face, so perfection did not matter. A coordinator named Patricia, who seemed to have mastered the art of multitasking to a terrifying degree, appeared beside me. You are going to be fine. Stand here. Put the cufflinks on. Smile like you know what you are doing. The guests will think nerves. They will not think you are impersonating the groom. I tried to nod, but my brain had already started staging rebellions. I thought about all the ways this could go wrong. What if I tripped on the aisle? What if someone recognized I was not the groom? What if I said the wrong thing in the vows? Patricia must have seen the panic on my face. Do not think, she said sharply. Just do. Follow her instructions. She will feed you everything through the earpiece. Repeat after her. No improvisation. You got this. An earpiece was handed to me, and I slid it in. I heard Sarah's voice immediately, quiet but insistent. You can do this. Just follow me. Pretend you know what you are doing. No one will notice. I nodded to myself. Pretend, yes. That sounded reasonable until I looked at her, standing there in her dress, holding her bouquet like a small piece of dignity in her hands. She looked terrified, exhausted, and somehow radiant. I could not believe I was about to fake being her husband in front of everyone she loved, for her sake. The groom had not shown up yet, and I was not sure where he had gone, probably hiding somewhere, hoping for a miracle. In my head, I could not help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. He deserved this. We were moved toward the main hall for a rehearsal of sorts. The music played faintly in the background, a pre-recorded track meant to cue the live musicians. 200 people, all masked, were milling around, laughing, talking, sipping champagne. Nobody knew that the groom had already failed spectacularly. Nobody knew that I was now going to be his replacement for at least the ceremony. Sarah whispered through the earpiece. They are all here. Just follow me. You will look like you are nervous. not fake. Just smile, repeat what I say, and pretend you have been part of this wedding all along. I tried to picture it. I would walk down the aisle holding a stranger's hand, repeat vows I had never written, kissed her while everyone recorded and applauded, and dance at a reception as though I belonged there. My brain kept asking why I had agreed to this. Then I realized it did not matter. I was in it now. There was no turning back. We were taken to a small side room where the first few guests would be seated. Sarah went through instructions. You will stand to my left, hold my hand, smile, nod, repeat after the minister, follow my lead. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Got it, I whispered, trying to sound confident. Patricia stepped in. You will be fine. Stand tall. People will follow your lead. If you look comfortable, they will think you are comfortable. If you look panicked, they will think you are nervous. Either way, you win. I laughed quietly at the thought. Win. I was about to impersonate a stranger's for a woman I had just met. But yes, in a strange way, I was winning. At least she would not be humiliated. At least he would be publicly exposed as the disaster he had been. We did a quick walkthrough of the ceremony. I practiced standing in the right spot, repeating phrases, holding her hand just right. Her grip was firm, almost a little desperate, and I realized she needed this more than I had ever imagined. Every time I glanced at her, I felt a strange mix of sympathy and admiration. By the time the final adjustments were made, I was sweating through the tuxedo, my heart pounding like a drum. Sarah adjusted the mask on my face, making sure it was secure. She handed me the coffee. The moment had arrived. Standing at the back of the hall, I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on us, though none of them knew exactly who I was. The guests were masked, oblivious to the real disaster that had been brewing for months, and I could feel a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness coursing through my body. I had never been part of anything like this in my life, and yet somehow, it felt exhilarating. Sarah adjusted her bouquet nervously, mascara streaks down her cheeks catching the light from the chandeliers. She whispered through the earpiece, "You are fine. Just follow me. Breathe. Smile. You look calm. They will think you are calm. Breathe. Smile. Look calm." I repeated it like a mantra as the music swelled through the speakers. The first notes of the processional echoed through the hall, and my stomach twisted with a combination of anticipation and dread. I had never been in a tuxedo this tight in my life, never walked in front of a crowd that size, holding the hand of a woman I barely knew, and certainly never done it under the guise of someone I was not. "Places," Patricia hissed, guiding us toward the aisle. I took a deep breath and tried to slow my heartbeat, though it felt like it was drumming against my ribcage. Guests were seated now, 200 masked faces all staring toward the back, waiting. I could feel the groom somewhere in the hall, hiding, probably hoping the floor would open up and swallow him. Sarah whispered, "This is it. You can do this." We began walking down the aisle. I tried to look like I belonged, though my legs felt like lead. Every step was a balancing act of keeping calm, holding her hand correctly, and pretending that I was a man whose life was as carefully constructed as this entire ceremony. My eyes scanned the masked guests. Some smiled politely, some whispered to each other, and I caught a few phones pointed at us, recording every awkward step. The first small victory came when I saw the groom's face peeking out from behind a pillar. He froze when he saw me, his eyes wide, realizing for the first time that he had lost control of the situation. I could not help but feel a surge of satisfaction. I was now firmly in the spotlight, and he was completely powerless. Sarah squeezed my hand tightly as we reached the altar. Her voice was steady through the earpiece. "Stand here, relax, repeat after the minister." The minister began speaking, his words flowing formally and subtly. I repeated them as instructed, sometimes catching myself almost laughing at the absurdity of the situation. I was promising to love, honor, and cherish someone I had known for a few hours, but in that moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The bride looked stunning, even through her mask and tears. Her trembling hands gripping her bouquet reminded me that she was terrified, exhausted, and yet somehow determined to maintain control over her wedding day. I realized that the entire charade was not just about humiliating the groom. It was about giving her back the dignity he had threatened to steal. When it came time for the vows, Sarah whispered every line into my earpiece. "Repeat after me. Speak clearly. Smile. Make them believe." I did, and the audience, masked and oblivious, seemed genuinely moved. A few dabbed at their eyes with tissues. I could not stop glancing at the groom, who was sweating in a hidden corner, looking smaller with every word I spoke. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the kiss. The masks were supposed to come off, but Sarah whispered, "Do not remove the mask, just lean in. They will think it is tradition. Nobody will notice." I leaned in, pressing my lips to hers for the briefest second possible. Applause erupted from the audience. Flashbulbs popped, and I could see the groom sink further into despair, realizing that his public exposure was complete. The ceremony continued, the minister guiding us through the final blessings, and I realized I was actually enjoying myself, not because I was marrying someone I did not know, but because the plan was working perfectly. The groom had caused chaos, and now he was completely powerless, while everyone else celebrated a wedding he no longer mattered in. After the ceremony, we were guided to the reception area. Music played, and masked guests mingled, still unaware of the true drama that had unfolded. I followed Sarah's instructions perfectly, dancing for a few songs, posing for photos, and playing the role of the husband she needed. At one point, a guest approached, curious about our story. Sarah whispered in my ear, and I improvised answers that made sense in context. I could feel the groom somewhere in the background, writhing in humiliation as every detail I invented subtly highlighted his failure. By the time dessert arrived, I realized that the plan had worked flawlessly. The groom had been publicly humiliated, Sarah had maintained her dignity, and I had survived a scenario I never thought possible. And through it all, a strange sense of pride grew inside me, not for what I had done to the bride, but for the creative, carefully executed humiliation that left the real culprit powerless in front of everyone he had wronged. The reception continued, laughter and chatter filling the hall. Guests were unaware of the hidden drama, enjoying what they thought was a perfectly normal wedding. Sarah leaned toward me, whispering through the earpiece, "You did it. You saved me. I cannot thank you enough." And in that moment, I realized that humiliating a total stranger, someone who had caused immense pain and chaos, could feel profoundly satisfying. I had become part of a story that no one would ever forget. A story where justice, timing, and a little creative thinking. If you made it this far, please subscribe to this channel and turn on post notifications to support the channel grow. As soon as we stepped into the reception hall, the atmosphere shifted. The lights were warmer here, chandeliers hanging like frozen fireworks above the tables. Guests laughed, sipped champagne, and whispered among themselves. I felt a strange combination of relief and anxiety. The ceremony was over. The hardest part was done, but now came the real challenge. I had to survive and steer the reception so Sarah could remain untarnished while the groom was completely exposed. Sarah squeezed my hand and whispered through the earpiece, "We are not done yet. Follow me. Remember what we practiced. You can do this." I nodded. Every instinct in me screamed to sit quietly, avoid attention, and pretend the day had been normal. But Sarah made it clear this was our chance. The groom had to face the consequences of his actions. I had a unique opportunity to orchestrate it without being obvious. The first few guests approached, congratulating us. I smiled, nodded, and repeated lines Sarah fed me through the earpiece. "Thank you so much," I said, and it was almost effortless. Every smile, every polite word, subtly reminded the groom of what he had ruined. Then came the first sign of real opportunity. The groom had tried to sneak in unnoticed, hoping to intercept guests and explain himself quietly. He froze when he saw me. I gave him the tiniest, perfectly executed smirk. Not too obvious, just enough for him to feel it. He swallowed hard, realizing he was completely powerless. I could see the recognition in his eyes. This was my stage now. Sarah leaned closer. "Do not let him ruin this. I trust you. Just keep calm and play along." I nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. The first creative move came during the champagne toast. The groom, pale and panicked, tried to raise a glass discreetly. I caught the moment and whispered to Sarah through the earpiece, "Let us invite him to give a toast first." Her eyes widened, and she whispered back, "Yes, perfect." Within moments, the groom was awkwardly handed the microphone, standing in front of everyone, realizing too late that he had become the centerpiece of attention. His voice trembled as he tried to speak. I could see the humiliation building. I smiled politely, nodded encouragingly, and subtly emphasized his mistakes through my body language. I leaned in toward Sarah when he faltered, held her hand firmly, and gave off the image of unwavering support. The guests, oblivious to the backstory, interpreted his nervousness as stage fright. But for us, for Sarah and me, it was a quiet, satisfying revenge. Every stammer, every red flush on his face was a small victory. I almost laughed at how beautifully it was unfolding. After the toast, we moved to the dance floor. Sarah whispered instructions, 3 songs, just follow me, keep everyone entertained. We danced, laughed, and smiled. I mimicked the gestures of a husband completely at ease. I kept an eye on the groom. Each time he tried to intervene or approach a guest, I subtly redirected attention back to Sarah. Every interaction, every polite correction, was another layer of humiliation. He was powerless, completely exposed, while we navigated the evening with grace. At one point, a photographer approached, asking us to pose for formal photos. I whispered to Sarah, "Let us make him part of the background." She grinned, "Do it." We positioned the groom in the back of the group, slightly off-center, awkwardly holding a glass, looking conspicuously out of place. The photographer clicked repeatedly, capturing every moment. Later, when the photos were shared online, the groom would be the odd figure in the background of every perfect memory we created. That thought alone made me almost giddy. Food was served, laughter echoed, and the evening began to feel like a genuine celebration. But Sarah and I knew our work was not done. There was still subtle humiliation, the quiet dismantling of the groom's credibility, to execute. During the speeches, I suggested carefully that each speaker recount a story highlighting trust, honesty, and the beauty of commitment. Sarah followed along, subtly prompting speakers to include anecdotes that contrasted sharply with the groom's behavior. Every story that mentioned loyalty, every memory of a happy, faithful relationship, became a quiet mirror held up to the man who had betrayed Sarah. The audience interpreted it as sentimental and sincere. He interpreted it as a public reckoning. By the end of the evening, the groom was pale, exhausted, and invisible, while Sarah glowed. Her laughter was genuine, and her confidence restored. Each step we had taken had been deliberate. Every toast, dance, and photo reinforced the reality that he was no longer the centerpiece of this wedding. The satisfaction was quiet, almost meditative. I realized that I had orchestrated something rare, a humiliation executed with precision, dignity, and artistry. Finally, the music slowed, signaling the last dance. I held Sarah's hand, guiding her through gentle steps, while the groom tried unsuccessfully to remain relevant. Every glance from guests reinforced his irrelevance. Every laugh from Sarah reinforced her triumph. As the night drew to a close, Sarah leaned in and whispered through the earpiece, "Thank you, you saved me. Not just the wedding, but me." In that moment, I understood that being proud of humiliating a total stranger was not about cruelty. It was about justice, timing, and helping someone reclaim control of their life. The groom had caused chaos, and in the most satisfying, subtle way, he faced consequences without confrontation or drama. I had participated in orchestrating that, and it felt good. By the time the guests began to leave, Sarah's family expressed gratitude, and the bride herself hugged me tightly. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "This was everything I could have hoped for. You were incredible." I smiled, exhausted, and finally allowed myself to relax. The groom was gone, vanished quietly into the night, and I realized the full scope of what we had achieved. 200 people had celebrated a wedding, completely oblivious to the chaos behind the scenes. Sarah had maintained her dignity, and he had been subtly but completely humiliated. I poured myself a glass of water, feeling a mix of adrenaline, relief, and satisfaction. Standing there, watching the end of the evening unfold, I felt proud. I had walked into a Starbucks unsuspecting and unaware, and ended up orchestrating a situation that gave a woman back her dignity and left a man completely exposed. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a strange mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. My head throbbed slightly from adrenaline and lack of sleep, but my mind replayed every moment of the previous day like a carefully directed movie. I had never imagined that standing in line for coffee could lead to orchestrating one of the most chaotic and satisfying experiences of my life. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee that actually tasted like it was meant to be savored this time. I kept thinking about Sarah. She had survived the day with her dignity intact, her confidence restored. The groom, the man whose actions had caused all of this, had disappeared quietly into the night, probably still grappling with the humiliation he had earned. I remembered the Starbucks encounter, the frantic energy, and the desperation in her eyes. She had trusted me immediately, despite having no reason to. She had turned to a complete stranger in a public space and asked for help at the most vulnerable moment of her life. And somehow, I had been able to deliver. Earpiece was still on the counter, a faint reminder of the chaos. I could hear myself laughing quietly as memories surfaced. The awkward smiles, the improvised answers, the dance floor choreography, and the perfectly timed photo opportunities where the groom looked out of place. Each detail had been small but deliberate. Each tiny maneuver had contributed to a larger outcome. The groom had been humiliated without drama, and Sarah had reclaimed control of her story. I thought about the guests as well. They had been oblivious to the hidden narrative. They had laughed, clapped, and toasted what they thought was a normal wedding. But in reality, they had been part of a carefully orchestrated display of justice. And that thought gave me a quiet sense of pride, not in cruelty, but in the precision and creativity it took to pull it off. Sarah's gratitude had been overwhelming. She had hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes, saying she could never repay me. I had smiled, brushed it off, but inside, I understood. We had done something extraordinary together, even if it had only been temporary, even if it had only existed for a few hours. We had turned a disaster into a triumph. I reflected on the groom. I did not feel joy in his failure. It was not about revenge for its own sake. It was about seeing consequences align with actions, about witnessing someone who had caused harm being powerless in the face of accountability. The quiet humiliation had been a form of natural justice, and I had played a role in it that was different from cruelty, that was strategic, precise, and meaningful. The day after, I checked my phone. There were photos, messages, and a few texts from friends who had been tagged in images of the reception. Sarah had shared some of the photos online, and sure enough, the groom was awkwardly placed in the background, perfectly out of sync with every group shot. It made me smile again. Every image told the story without a single word. The chaos was immortalized, and the result was subtly perfect. I also thought about the way life could twist, in unpredictable ways. One minute, I was standing in line for coffee, minding my own business. The next, I was part of a wedding, performing as a husband for someone I had never met, orchestrating the public humiliation of a stranger. It was surreal, absurd, and yet intensely real. Life had handed me a scenario I could not have imagined, and somehow, I had navigated it successfully. Sarah had called me later that afternoon. Her voice was lighter, more relaxed than I had ever heard. "I cannot stop thinking about yesterday," she said. "I do not know how you did it, but you saved me. I was terrified, and now I feel like I can breathe again." I laughed softly. "It was a team effort," I said, knowing it was mostly me following her precise instructions. "You made it easy," she chuckled, and there was a moment of silence. Then she said, "Do you realize what you did? You turned my worst day into a story I will tell forever. You humiliated him without drama, without confrontation. And you did it so seamlessly that no one could ever guess what really happened." I paused. It was true. The whole event had been a careful balance of performance, improvisation, and timing. Every gesture, every word, every smile had contributed to a larger plan. And now that it was over, I could see how powerful it had been. I thought about the lessons I had learned from this. Life could throw chaos at you in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes, the right response was not anger or confrontation, but creativity, patience, and a willingness to step into a role that seemed impossible. By doing so, you could turn a disaster into something meaningful, something empowering. I also realized that being proud of humiliating a total stranger did not have to mean being cruel. It could mean restoring balance, delivering justice, and helping someone else reclaim control of their life. In this case, the groom's actions had caused pain and disruption, and the result had been a subtle, precise, and deserved exposure. The satisfaction I felt was not from harming him personally, but from seeing the natural consequences of his choices manifest so clearly. As I sipped the last of my coffee, I felt a quiet pride. I had been part of something extraordinary. A stranger had trusted me with her vulnerability, and I had risen to the occasion. I had orchestrated an intricate dance of humor, timing, and subtle justice, and I had done it in a way that felt authentic, natural, and meaningful. The story of that day would stay with me forever. Every detail, from Starbucks to the reception, was vivid in my mind. I could recall the panic in her eyes, the tension in the air, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing consequences unfold. And even though it had been chaotic, absurd, and unpredictable, it had worked perfectly. I smiled, realizing that sometimes life presented opportunities in the most unexpected ways. A total stranger could become a part of your life in a moment, and you could have the power to help them reclaim their story, assert their dignity, and face justice creatively. And in that moment, I knew I would always be proud of that day, proud of the choices I had made, and proud of the subtle, satisfying humiliation of a man who had deserved it. That was the day I realized that life's chaos could be turned into something meaningful. That sometimes, being proud of humiliating a total stranger was about much more than embarrassment. It was about timing, creativity, and restoring balance. And it was about stepping up when someone needed you most, even if it seemed completely impossible at the time. I leaned back in my chair and let the memories settle. The adrenaline had faded, but the satisfaction remained. Life had handed me a story I could never forget, and I had played my part perfectly. And I would always remember that moment, standing in that reception hall, knowing that in a strange, surreal, and completely real way, I had been the instrument of justice, and I had done it with style.